We are now moving into the next session for the day, which in another 2 minutes is going to transport us from UK to South America. And I can think of no one better than our serious professional hobbyist, Vikas Singh of the Trains, Tea and Tintin fame to take us there. Vikas, I hand over to you.
Good morning, Ayan. All the way from Santiago. It's quite early in the morning there.
Exactly.
Welcome to the conference. Ayan is BA in Economics from University of Manchester. From 1968 to 1976, he was a transport economist at consulting companies based in London, Caracas, Sydney, and Rio de Janeiro. Caracas has a special interest for me because it's one of the places Tintin visits in his comics. From 1976 to 2005, he was economist at the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, headquartered in Santiago, retiring as head of the transport division. He is the promoter and the first president of the Society for the Preservation of Railway Heritage, which reintroduced steam traction to Chile for special trains, as well as establishing the Temuco Railway Museum. He's an organizer of tours for rail fans in Chile and neighboring countries. He's also an author of 3 books on the history of railways in Chile and other South American countries. Today, Ayan is going to talk about the last nitrate railway in Chile. Now, nitrates were the lifeblood of the Chilean economy from 1884 to 1930, a period in which a multiplicity of factories transformed nitrate-bearing ore into saleable products. Out of a series of nitrate railways, only one survived into the 21st century, these being that popularly known as the Tocopilla to El Toco Railway. I hope I pronounced it correct. During its 125-year lifetime, the FCT changed ownership several times and reoriented its network of lines, but survived so long by serving the 2 biggest nitrate factories, which were technologically more advanced than the others. Attempts are being made to preserve some representative items of its equipment. But today at the conference, Ayan is also representing the Santiago Railway Museum. Welcome, Ayan, and over to you.
Vikas, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, I was invited to speak on whatever I wanted to speak on. And for us in Chile, a very interesting subject is the last nitrate railway. You got the presentation, right?
Yeah. I'll run it. Yeah. Yes.
You can share the screen somehow, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So you can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great idea you've got, this international worldwide virtual conference. The theme of my talk is the last nitrate railway. I'm going to divide the talk into 4 basic compartments. Firstly, what are nitrates and what are they used for? Secondly, the nitrate railways. There were 9 in total. The last one disappeared around 6 years ago. We speak about the evolution of the nitrate industry itself, why it was so important to the Chilean economy. And then we go on to a home in on the Tocopilla to El Toco railway and the attempts being made to save something from it. Can we pass to the next slide, please? Yeah, the next one. Yeah, great. Firstly, nitrates is basically sodium nitrate, which is a non-metallic mineral resource found near the coast of Chile between 19 degrees south and 26 degrees south. It's found in an ore known as caliche in the Chilean language, which contains between 12% and around 25% of sodium nitrate. It's found in this latitude band that I mentioned, between 950 and 1,300 meters above sea level, along a discontinuous band that you can see in the map. The blue rings indicate where nitrate was found and exploited. Nitrates were and still are used as a fertilizer in agriculture, in explosives, and in a variety of other industrial applications. The next one, please.
Yes.
Can we move it all along?
Yeah, yeah.
Great, yeah. Well, the picture is Chile did a pretty good job on promoting nitrates all around the world. I think this particular advertisement is for the British market. You see a guy spreading sodium nitrate along his fields with a very English countryside view in the background. The caliche, or the nitrate ore, was normally processed near the ore itself. There were one or two cases where the caliche was sent down to the coast and processed there. That was not the norm. It was processed in the nitrate fields themselves. This meant that not only had the nitrates had to be sent down to the ports, but the same railways had to bring inputs like coal, petroleum, and other things to the factories to take part in the concentration process. There are no navigable rivers in the nitrate zone because the nitrate zone is the driest desert in the world. There are some places where there have never been any recorded rainfall. But in the boom years of the nitrate industry, from 1870 to 1930, mechanized road transport was either non-existent or in an embryonic form. Therefore, by having no navigable rivers and being exploited before the time that mechanized road transportation took up, the only way to ship the nitrates down to the ports and get the inputs up to the nitrate factories was by a railway. Next one, please. There were 9 nitrate railways in total. I'm not going to go to this level of detail, but if you want to know what they were, you can see them on the slide. The biggest one was called the Nitrate Railways Company. Therefore, in the presentation, the written version, when I use nitrate with a small letter, I mean nitrate railways in general. It's got a capital letter that refers to a Nitrate Railways Company Limited. And there were other railways, most of them dedicated only to the nitrate industry. But one or two, especially the Antofagasta to Bolivia Railway Company, carried nitrates and other things as well. The next one, please. The railways were very, very difficult to operate for various reasons. Firstly, they climbed from 0 meters above sea level at the Pacific ports, like Iquique, like Pisagua, like Antofagasta, up to 1,000 meters or over within an airline distance of just 50 kilometers, which meant that the average grade was 2%. One other difficulty was that in steam days, the locomotives need pure water. Whilst there was some brine from the only river which passes through the zone, it was not the quality that steam locomotives needed. So water had to be distilled from the sea, which is a very expensive process. for the steam locomotives. Another problem was that the coal mines were 1,750 kilometers away to the south. Towards the end of the nitrate boom years, petroleum started to be used as a locomotive fuel. And that had to come from California, which was many thousands of miles away to the north. So fuel was expensive and difficult to get. Another thing to be borne in mind is because the nitrate was processed inland, about 1/3 of the total load carried by the nitrate railways was inputs, which had to be carried uphill. The nitrates went downhill, but the inputs had to be shipped uphill. These difficulties required some technological innovations, which we're going to see some of them on the next slide. The photograph is of an inclined plane from on the Agua Santa Railway down to the Caleta Buena, from which the nitrates were shipped out. In this particular case, the nitrate railway ran along a plane to the top of the inclined plane, and there wagons were carried down by the inclined plane with no locomotive being involved. That was one of the technologies used. There was no rack and pinion usage on the nitrate railways, which may seem surprising. There were rack and pinion railways in Chile, for instance, on the Arica to La Paz Railway just to the north, on the Transandine Railway, the latitude of Santiago, way to the south. But rack and pinion lines were not used. There were cases of zigzags. The most renowned zigzags are those in the Central Railway of Peru. But on the nitrate railway itself, getting out of Pisagua, there were several zigzags to climb up to the nitrate plane. And there are other cases of just zigs, a reversal, not a zigzag, just a zig, to gain altitude as well. In several railways, seawater was distilled for the locomotives, and the locomotives themselves had to be very, very powerful to climb the grades, and very, very flexible, because some of the curves were very, very sharp. The types of locomotives involved in steam locomotive days were the double fairley, the Shay, Kitts and Meyer, and the Bayer Garrett. Different nitrate railways employed different types of locomotives of these types. Because of the lack of water supply, the first diesel locomotive imported to Chile was built in 1929 and arrived in 1930 to work on the Junín Railway. But in this same period, at the end of the 1920s, one stretch of railway on the Tocopilla to El Toco Railway was electrified. Carry on, please. Next slide. This illustrates some of the locomotives used on the nitrate railways. The photograph above the left-hand side is the Kitts and Meyer type locomotive. This one still survives, preserved in a place called Tal Tal, which Tal Tal was a port served by one of the nitrate railways. These Kitts and Meyer locomotives, there was some in India, by the way, were built by the Kitson Locomotive Company in Leeds. The lower photograph is of Bayer Garrett. For a brief time in the late 1920s, the nitrate railways Bayer Garretts were the most powerful locomotives in the Southern Hemisphere. They were used to get trains out of the port of Iquique up to the nitrate plain. Carry on, please. The upper photograph shows a reversal, not a zigzag, half a zigzag, it's a zig. One of the rings shows where the locomotive is. The other ring shows where the train is. The locomotive is putting itself on the other end of the train to carry on climbing down or descending down to the port of Iquique from the nitrate plain. The lower photograph is the first diesel locomotive imported to Chile. It was called the Junin, and it ran briefly on the Junin Railway, one of the nitrate railways. It ran briefly because it arrived in early 1930, just at the time when the nitrate industry was collapsing. The locomotive ran trials, and nothing more than that, because the railway closed down. After that, it was sold to a nitrate factory, and it was declared a national monument. I asked for it to be declared a national monument in 1989, but illegally, in the following year, it was shipped to England, and it's still a national monument. It's displayed in the Leeds Industrial Museum. It got there illegally. We want it back. We had no success in getting it there. Carry on, please. Yeah, you may never heard of the War of the Pacific, where it's fought between Chile on one side and Bolivia and Peru on the other side. And it was sparked by the fact that Bolivia broke an agreement with Chile not to increase taxes on Chilean companies operated in Bolivian territory. And one of them was what a railway company, which later became the Antofagasta to Bolivia Railway Company. Bolivia upped taxes on that company, and that sparked the War of the Pacific. And because of the war, the nitrate fields which Bolivia had owned and Peru had owned were ceded to Chile, where Chile won the war. And after that, all natural nitrate production was concentrated in Chile. Chile had a monopoly of nitrate production. The boom years of the nitrate industry from 1880 to 1930. And in some years in that period, 60% of tax revenue in Chile came from nitrates, and 80% of exports came from exports too. The whole thing collapsed in 1930 because of the Wall Street crash, which brought the worldwide economy to its knees. The proliferation of synthetic nitrates to compete with Chilean natural nitrates, and the very high taxation which Chile applied to nitrate producers. Because of these three happenings, two nitrate railways closed down immediately, and some followed in the following years. But paradoxically, one nitrate railway opened up. It was built by the state, the only state-owned nitrate railway. It was built to compete with a privately owned, British-owned Nitrate Railways Company Limited. And just when the state railway was opened up, the nitrate industry came crashing down. The next one, please. The graph shows nitrate production. It crept up until 1929, when total production reached 3 million tons. Then crashed down, fluctuated, and then went into steady decline. There's still nitrate production in Chile, about 1 million tons, but nothing like the boom years, the late 1920s. One railway which carried nitrates, the Antofagasta to Bolivia Railway Company, could carry on by dealing in carrying copper. The same railway which attended the nitrate fields also attends the Chuquicamata copper mine. So the FCAB, the Antofagasta Bolivia Railway Company, carried on flying. It still carries on today by attending the copper industry. The other nitrate railways, except the Tocopilla-Torco one, gradually closed down between 1930 and 1979. The next one, please. The Tocopilla to El Torco Railway, FCTT, started out in 1890 to serve some nitrate factories called officinas in the El Toco area, inland from Tocopilla, which is the port. These nitrate factories use old-fashioned Shanks technology. In the late 1920s, a big US company owned by the Guggenheim brothers pulled a hold in the nitrate industry and started building two gigantic nitrate factories, one called the Pedro de Valdivia and one called the Maria Elena. These big nitrate factories were quite close to the Tocopilla to El Toco railway, and because the US company did not want to depend on the nitrate on the Tocopilla to El Toco railway to carry its nitrate out to the port of Tocopilla, the company bought the railway. So in the 1920s, the Tocopilla to El Toco railway changed from being a British-owned company to being a US-owned company. The US-owned company extended the line to reach the factories of Pedro de Valdivia and Maria Elena. This railway, typical of many nitrate railways, has a very steep climb, to get from the port to the nitrate plain. There, the ruling grade is 4.1%. And some of the curves are very, very sharp, of 55 degrees radius. Carry on, please. This is a map of the Tocopilla to El Toco network. The lines in green or green-blue are of the Tocopilla to El Toco railway itself, which is a 3-foot 6-inch gauge, 1 meter 67 millimeters. The red line is a state-owned north-south line in Chile. Carry on, please. The railway had a total extension of 257 meters in its boom days. The owning company, it changed hands several times between private companies and state-owned companies, and now is in the hands of a privately owned Soquimich, that's what the company is called. Soquimich was in state hands during the Salvador Allende communist government in Chile in the early 1970s. It was privatized by the later Augusto Pinochet government. The Tocopilla to El Toco railway, years of operation between around 1960 and when it closed down 6 years ago, was carrying about 1 million tons of nitrate per year. I mentioned that the company served old technology factories in the El Toco area. When these factories closed down, the railway closed down what had been its previous main line to serve these nitrate factories. And the main line changed from being the line which served the old technology factories to being the line which served the Guggenheim factories of Maria Elena and Pedro de Valdivia. The line on the climb out from the port of Tocopilla was electrified in the late 1920s, but this is between a place called the port of Tocopilla and a place called Tigre, where traction would change from steam to electricity. Steam carried on being used between the factories and Tigre until 1959, and the trains were hauled by Pitson-Meyer locomotives. Presumably, I'd never seen a photograph of Pitson-Meyer in the 1950s hauling a train carrying nitrates, but it must have been so. The locomotives used on the climb up from Tocopilla were 1927 vintage General Electric BO electrics, which could pass by the very sharp curves. By the late 1990s, they were becoming unreliable. Therefore, the company ordered from Casa Grande Motori in Santiago new electric locomotives. They were the only ones ever made in Chile. They were used as from 2013 up to 2015 when the railway closed down. The next one, please. We move on to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. In August of 2015, the company decided to carry using the railway rather than using lorries to carry the nitrate down to Tocopilla. But this all ended in August 2015 because a very rare storm hit the area, and the storm washed with it sections of the railway. The Sokomich company ordered a stay to decide what to do, whether to repair the railway or to use lorries to carry the nitrates down to Tocopilla by truck. But in December 2016, the conclusion was reached that it would be more economic to write off the railway and use lorry truck transport to carry the nitrates down to Tocopilla. The railway ended in August of 2015. We have been trying to get some of the equipment from the railway preserved, especially one of the 1927 vintage GE electric locomotives, one of the Casa Grande locomotives made in 2012, 2013, the only electric locomotives ever made in Chile, and a couple of nitrate wagons. We don't know whether we've been successful because the company does not reply. We hope we'll be successful. We've got no evidence of that so far. Carry on, please. The upper photograph to the right is of the stretch of the railway, the Tocopilla railway, on the climb out of Tocopilla. It runs along a precipice where it never rains normally, but if it does rain heavily, you can see what happens. Everything comes crashing down and takes the railway with it. And that's what happened in August of 2015. The lower photographs shows one of the electric locomotives made in Chile, in Santiago, to work over the Tocopilla to El Toco, a railway. Carry on, please. The end there. There's no photograph of the GE electric locomotives, but they worked on the line until 2012, 2013. Here we end. It might be a very provincial topic. It's important to us in Chile. It may not be to you in India, England, or wherever else, but it's important to us in Chile. We hope to preserve something from the railway. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, Ayan, you can hear us, no?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Ayan, so you have been a transport expert, a transport economist, and now you are looking at preservation of railways. So the problem that we face here in India and in several parts of the world, even in Southeast Asian countries, is how to raise money, because most of the private owned railways, for them, that it does not make economic sense to preserve them. For them, it's better to sell it off as a scrap. So how can one balance between the need for heritage as well as looking at the economic aspects of it?
Oh. You're still frozen.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yes.
Yeah, this is what happens here too. The Nitrate Railways Company Limited, for instance, owned 6 very big, very heavy Garrett locomotives. But because they were big and heavy, they were worth a lot of scrap. So they were sold for scrap in the 1960s. The only 2 Nitrate Railways Company Limited locomotives which have been preserved are 2 very small shunting locomotives, not representative at all. That's the problem. The big locomotives, which are worth a lot in scrap, get scrapped. When I was president of the Railway Conservation Society, we ran steam trains, mainly for the Chilean public, but some of them for visiting rail fans from other countries, from the US and Europe, UK especially. We paid the railway track use fees. We rented in the carriages. We basically paid rates based on marginal costs. Because of that, from a fair income, we could cover the cost of running the trains. But this was an exceptional circumstance. We were not earning enough money, for instance, to pay for an overhaul of the locomotive when an overhaul was needed. We can cover marginal costs, but nothing more than that. These days, the State Railway Company runs the tourist trains. The Conservation Society has virtually been abandoned. And the State Railway Company charges much higher fares than we charged in the days when I ran the trains. Our social society ran the trains. It has to charge high fares because the state company pays to the concessionaires that maintain the track. It pays full cost, fixed cost plus marginal cost. And to cover these total costs, you have to charge high fares to the public.
Okay, and on this nitrate railway, there was never any passenger service or something? I mean, it was always just for industrial use, or were they a part of the passenger network also?
The nitrate railway companies ran passenger trains, mainly to serve the people who worked in the nitrate factories, to give them a day out on the beach, for instance, or a week out on the beach. Trains ran between the factories and the ports which the nitrate railways served. There were, a few years ago, 4 British-built wooden-bodied passenger carriages stored in Tocopilla. I rented some of the carriages a few times to run trains for visiting rail fans from the US and from the UK. So all nitrate railways ran trains for passengers just to serve really the people who worked in the nitrate factories. The passenger trains were very, very infrequent, but there were passenger trains.
Okay. There is a feedback from Andrew Gibbons. He says, it's a shame that Locomotives company doesn't respond to inquiries about preserving their nitrate railway equipment. Any chance of getting someone with national influence or prestige involved, or bringing public opinion to bring on the issue?
We are in the process of doing that. A person recently incorporated into trying to get something done is the president of the corporation which runs the Santiago Railway Museum. And later on today, I'm trying to enlist the help of a senator called Carlos Cantero. Before he was a senator, he was a mayor of Tocopilla. I'm trying to get his help too. But what I fear may have happened, but it's too late. The electric locomotives and the nitrate wagons have already been scrapped. I hope it's not so, but it may well be so. Also, we incorporated some heavyweights to try and get something done, but it may be too late.
Okay. Apurva gave a feedback. That was a fantastic presentation. Now he asked how much time did a normal journey on this nitrate railway take? I mean, for transportation, what was the normal average?
Well, the nitrate railways, the average distance by a railway between a typical port like Iquique, like Pisagua, like Antofagasta, and the typical nitrate factory was around 100 kilometers. The airline distance around 50 kilometers, but because the railway winded around the hills, the rail distance was about 100 kilometers. Typically, a train, a passenger carrying train, between the nitrate factories and the port would take around 5 or 6 hours. The freight carrying freight trains would take more than that, but several hours in the best of cases.
You talked about one of the challenges during the steam movement, steam locomotives of getting, fresh water. I mean, the water otherwise was saline. How did the railways overcome this huge problem? Because getting, fresh water would have been a big issue in that arid desert-like climate.
Yeah, at a few points, there are wells to get fresh water up from down below. But in other cases, the railway companies distilled seawater for their steam locomotives. That was a very, very expensive process, but there's often no option but to do that.
Some of the practices involved, I mean, you did talk about some similarity with the Indian railway system also. The Z reverses, they have been employed here in the Darjeeling Himalayan railway system also to gain incline. So some similarity in the way nitrate railway operated there to gain height and the way the Darjeeling Himalayan railways operate here in India. And they also use the same this thing. Now, this Bayer-Garrett locomotives obviously would have been used to all greater loads. Was that the reason to move to these heavy duty locomotives, or it was just cheaper option at point in time to go for it?
The Nitrate Railways Company Limited in the early 1920s wanted to electrify the stretch out of the port of Iquique up to the nitrate plain. But for some reason in those days, for a railway to electrify a stretch of its line, you had to get Congress permission. And by 1 or 2 votes, the Senate voted not to allow the electrification of the line on the climb out of Iquique. And because of that, the Nitrate Railways Company Limited had to think of another solution. His other solution was to buy Bayer-Garrett locomotives, which could haul 400 tons on the grades of 4% out of the port of Iquique. These locomotives, they were put in 2 batches, 3 in each batch. The 3 in the first batch, for a number of years, were the most powerful locomotives in the Southern Hemisphere. The second batch arrived in 1928, but the nitrate industry collapsed in 1930. So these 6 locomotives, very powerful, very sophisticated locomotives, were virtually not needed after 1930 because the tonnage carried fell off because of the collapse of the nitrate industry.
There was a request, I think, maybe sometime in the next presentation, you can show from Mr. Raghunandan on sharing some more photographs. I mean, obviously, it has been very interesting, but there was limitation of time and won't share. Maybe the next time you agree to share, I mean, some more pictures and some more historical background, that would be fascinating. Thanks, Ayan, for joining us for the conference today. Thanks for agreeing to be part of this. It's very, very early there in Santiago. And we are very grateful to you for having, for your presentation and for your agreement to be a part of this entire conference. Thank you very much. We had a nice time listening to a very fascinating part of industrial railway from a part of the world which we really don't know much about. Really.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah.
It's a great honor for me.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you very much. Thank you.